Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBingeIt podcast. My name is James.
And my name is Kim. And we're watching Star Trek Prodigy and overanalyzing each episode like true Star Trek geeks. Hit it. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 11, Asylum. This episode began streaming October 27th, 2022. This is the first episode since February, but we are apparently still in Season 1.
This is great. I missed that opening. We've not seen it for months. And of course, it has no singing, which is the only way for a Star Trek intro to start.
Fair enough. I wonder if there's anyone else who obsesses about the openings of Star Trek shows quite as much as you.
Probably not. I was just thinking, it comes up with a little box saying skip intro.
Yeah.
I would want it so that if you click the skip intro, it would actually come up with a bigger box saying, what's wrong with you?
You are not a true Star Trek fan.
Yeah, you have to watch the intro.
Yeah, I don't like to skip the intro unless I'm binging a show and watching multiple episodes in a day, and then I don't want to hear the intro.
That does happen, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Well, it has been a while. In fact, it's been so long that our 6-year-old correspondent, Mahi, is now our 7-year-old correspondent, so she's just growing up.
Well, some of us have never really grown up, so...
Well, that's true. I think you're pretty much the same as you were back in February.
Yeah.
Well, if this is your first time joining us on Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBingeIt podcast, James and I like to walk through the episode. We try not to give too much detail because we're hoping you just watched it, but we do like to analyze each scene. And then at the end, we will talk about, different things like what stood out for us in the episode, any sort of character development that happened with the different characters. And then we also like to talk about the Star Trekkiness because that's the thing that brought us here. And then if we get any feedback on the episode from people on our Facebook group, or if anyone sends us an email, we will typically read it at the end. We had very little lead time today between the episode that we watched and the time that we're recording, so we don't have a lot of feedback this time, and that's totally fine.
We had a couple of pieces of feedback.
We did get a few, but if we get more in the future, we will read that here as well.
So, are you ready to get started?
I am. I think that's all of the intro that we need.
Okay. Well, let's get right into the episode. We start with a shot diving under the surface of an ocean planet, and we see what seems to be some kind of whale being chased by aquatic creatures who are throwing spears at it.
Fortunately, these guys are really bad shots.
No.
Fish guys, not good aimers.
No, they all miss. Well, following behind the whale are our heroes. They're attempting to save the creature called an aquathorn from poachers, as the planet's ecosystem depends on it. They're in a small ship, which Kim thinks looks like Spock's ship from the Kelvin universe Star Trek.
It was lacking the spinning part of that ship, but it was kind of shaped similarly. Yeah, I did think that.
Dal brings up the Prime Directive, but Gwen, who's driving, seems a bit more Kirkian and is more worried about saving the creature than the Prime Directive. I did kind of like that. That did seem like a nod towards the original Trek, where Kirk was more interested in carrying out the mission or what he thought was important, rather than following the Prime Directive.
She also had this overly positive attitude about how if they only knew that the planet depended on this creature, that they wouldn't be chasing it and trying to kill it. So she's also got that Star Trek positivity going for her there.
Oh, definitely.
But I think we know that's not true.
You mean they wouldn't listen?
No. People don't care what's good for them or for their planet.
Well, they act as bait to lure the creature away, but suddenly Gwen freezes and begins having a flashback to the previous episode with the diviner telling her,
"It is a weapon."
You've been waiting to do that for months, haven't you?
Lies and hypocrisy.
Well, as Gwyn is frozen in this trance-like state, having the flashback, their craft gets eaten by the whale.
And Jankum gets the opportunity to deliver another Jankum classic when he says, Jankum swore he'd never get eaten alive. Again. Dal calls for help, and we do see the whale being transported to the Protostar.
Totally get the Star Trek Voyage Home vibes here.
Yeah, clearly that is the point.
Already, I have to shout out to the animation. It is just beautiful, and it is so rich.
Well, they get the whale into the cargo bay, and the whale spits them out, and Holo Janeway is there, and she scolds them for almost breaking the Prime Directive. but it's almost. So chill out, Janeway.
I feel Dal should ask here that, so we don't like these people? Because we can usually break the Prime Directive if we like the aliens.
It's so true. How many times do we talk about that on ReBinge Deep Space Nine?
Yeah. These guys are cool. We'll just break the Prime Directive.
Yep.
Zero asks Gwen if she had another vision. So this has happened before and obviously happening regularly.
Right.
Zero tells her that they won't rest until Gwen's memories return. And an excited Rock Talk in the background who's scanning the whale informs them that the whale has babies. She's very excited about that.
Yeah. Another reference to the voyage home.
Meanwhile, Jankum is pretty much being sick during this whole scene.
I have to say, I wasn't super clear on why he was being sick. You had to tell me, it's like he's car sick from how they were flying around.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just didn't make sense to me in the moment.
Gwyn's a pretty wacky flyer.
And now we have Dal recording a log, and he gives a star date, which is 61209.5, which, I don't know. I always think star dates are made up, but did that sound made up to you?
It definitely made up, yeah.
He says Gwen hasn't recovered her memories from what happened with her father, and he also talks about how now they're carrying out good deeds in the spirit of the Federation because they're worried that once the Federation finds out that they stole the Protostar, they're going to have trouble being accepted. So they're trying to show that, hey, we're good people.
Yes.
And now they're en route to the closest Federation comm relay station, and he's really hoping that the Federation will take them in. As refugees is their plan.
Yeah. And we see the Protostar heading towards the station to dock. Rocktalk says, rolling up in a stolen starship. Not the best way to make a first impression. Either they're going to like us, or it will get real awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not the best approach, but it's all they've got.
And I still don't think that they stole the Protostar. I mean, they found it. It was an abandoned car, and they took it.
Yeah, they're returning Starfleet's property.
Exactly. They're really bringing it back.
They're in the right here.
Yeah. And Dal in his voiceover says he hopes that they'll have a place to belong. Aw.
Yes.
As he is expressing some concern about how he's going to be looked at, Janeway tells him that sometimes you have to make a leap of faith. And then he actually hugs hologram Janeway, and she says, well, this is a new experience for a hologram.
Who doesn't want to hug hologram Janeway?
I think we hugged hologram Janeway in the previous episode when Rock Talk gave her form. I think it already happened.
Yeah.
Am I imagining things?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Well, they're also in cadet uniforms in this episode, and they cross over to the outpost in a physical gangway. It looks like a force field type gangway between the ship and the station. Once they get onto the station, it's all shiny and new and clean, and they find there's only a single Starfleet officer there. He's a strange little alien, Lieutenant Junior Grade, Barniss Frex, a Denobulan like Dr. Phlox in Enterprise, I believe.
Was that a Star Trek show?
Oh, yes, it was. I know it wasn't a show really for you or for me, but people did watch it. And Frex tells them that they are at CR 721, the Federation's furthest comms relay outpost, the final frontier, he says. He has a very quirky sense of humor.
He's kind of disappointed none of them react to that.
True. When the crew says they have something to tell him, he gets worried that Starfleet is planning to send him somewhere worse. Somewhere like maybe a floating strip mall out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, he says Nimbus 3, which is a reference to Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. So now I get the joke that he just made about the final frontier.
Yeah, I didn't get that joke at all. I had to look it up. So I think it's because I watched that movie one time and then instantly forgot all about it.
I thought it was a nice little tie-in. It's something, again, for the Star Trek nerds. Let's throw that in, and you'll recognize it.
And also, he's got a unique little badge with the normal Starfleet symbol, but then sort of a squarish background to it.
Yes. When I rewatched this, I noticed that. It is a different style.
Yeah. It's the same one, though, that we see later that the current Starfleet crew is wearing.
Yeah.
So I guess that's just what the badges look like right now.
You know what it could be?
Mm-hmm.
Merchandising. Everybody has
Could
to go
be.
and buy a new Star Trek badge now, obviously.
Could be. Maybe there's a gift shop on the station.
That would be perfect.
Sure, and it would be automated. You don't need a clerk or anything. It'd be fine.
Yeah. Well, they give a quick summary of how they're not Starfleet and the events that brought them here. Gwen tells Frex they want Asylum and to join Starfleet.
Hence the title of the episode.
Yeah. Frex tells them that Starfleet welcomes all types and asks to scan them to get them into the database. It immediately recognizes Jankum as a Tellarite and Rok-Tahk as a Bricktar. Jankum is very happy to hear that the Tellarites were founding members of the Federation and says, Jankum Pog is royalty. And you hear Dal in the background say, oh boy, here we go.
Oh, that's very cute.
I think he has Jankum's number.
Yeah, but also we learned that back in the episode where we first meet Janeway and she gives that overview of the Federation, and we had the little Tellarite there. Maybe he forgot.
Well, that does seem like something Jankum would forget.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was like yesterday. I've totally forgotten it.
Yeah, good point.
When he scans Gwen, she of course is an unknown species, and Frex suggests that on the paperwork he'll just put none of the above as her race.
Yeah, this guy's just checking boxes. He doesn't want to do any paperwork.
I think this might be the first hint of why Frex has been stationed in the back end of nowhere.
Oh, good point. He is very friendly.
Yeah.
Though I don't understand this. The wording here is like they're just going to join Starfleet. I don't think that's the way you get into Starfleet, but maybe into the Federation.
Well, they're asking for Asylum, but yeah, it does seem a little bit easy, but I'll just go with it.
Yeah, I understand the concept of Asylum, but you're not getting Asylum into Starfleet. You're getting Asylum into the Federation.
Then I suppose if your Asylum's approved, you could join Starfleet.
Sure.
Well, he identifies Murph as a melanoid slime worm, which, another piece of Star Trek trivia that you informed me of, Kim, was what Wesley Crusher was insulted as by some alien race.
Yeah, this is a deep Star Trek The Next Generation cut where there was an episode where Wesley was actually trying to get into Starfleet and he bumps into another person and that person calls him a melanoid slime worm. I mean, that's a pretty deep cut, but I don't think there are any other references to it. So I suppose from here they have a pretty clear playing field to do whatever they want with this character.
Right. Frex also knows about Medusans and he says, yeah, if he laid eyes on him, he'd go mad. But it's too late for me being cooped up here. Oh, kind of feel bad for this guy. I did like
that. Yeah, he just sort of brushed that off. Yeah, I've heard it before. Whatever.
Well, Frex tries to guess Dal's race, but Dal says they won't know what he is. But as he goes through the scanner, it gives a warning. And I say warning because it was flashing red, saying, report to Starfleet Command.
Yeah, a flashing red light with Starfleet, it's just never a good sign. Yeah. I mean, there's never a flashing red light that is telling you, oh, look, here's a box of kittens. It's always something bad. Even Kmart, when they had the sales, it was the blue light. It wasn't the flashing red light.
Flashing red light, yeah. It does look like a warning.
Yes.
Well, Dal overall is just excited that at least somebody knows what he is.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Even if it is flagged as a potentially dangerous or lethal creature.
Well, now we go into a flashback.
Yeah.
And we are at the christening of the Protostar, and we see a bottle of wine flying through space and running into the Protostar as if it was a ship.
Yeah.
And that bottle of wine, I'm pretty sure, is Chateau Picard, although we couldn't get a completely clear picture, but I think that's what it was. So we see Captain Chakotay watching this christening. Also, we see the real Vice Admiral Janeway. So this is not Holo Janeway.
Yeah.
And Chakotay tells Janeway that the mission is to go back to the Delta Quadrant. And if he runs into trouble, she's going to be the first person that he'll call.
Good idea. She did get the crew out.
That's true. Although she doesn't understand why he wants to go back there. I agree with her. This doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Let's be honest. The Delta Quadrant does not seem as bad as the Gamma Quadrant. The Gamma Quadrant is the quadrant of jerks. Pretty much every race they encountered in the Gamma Quadrant seemed to be either hostile, aggressive, or dying.
Well, yes, it was not a good place to visit. I took note here, too, that the animated versions of every one of the real people, they're all uncomfortably skinny. I mean, and not realistically skinny, I guess, was the point.
Yeah, it is heavily stylized.
Of course it is. And then we hear Freeze program. And you see that this is actually just a hologram.
Yeah.
And the real Janeway says to the frozen Chakotay, why didn't you call? And an Andorian at this point interrupts to tell the Admiral that they've tracked the last Protostar signature to a planetoid in the Carina Nebula, and she tells them to set a course. But before she leaves, she says, if you're out there, Chakotay, we'll find you. And here's, too, where I saw that these Starfleet folks are wearing the same badge as Frex.
Ah, right. On the relay station, Rok-Tahk is going through all the possible specialist sciences she can study. Zero is in medical with Gwen, and on this station they have the medical tech to actually help her restore her memory. Jankum is in the mess, eating hot dogs. I guess that's an of course.
Yes.
And Dal is excited that Starfleet actually knows what he is. Meanwhile, at the consoles, Frex is about to start downloading the Protostar's logs. On the Protostar, the camera drops below the bridge to a red-lit room and a sinister glowing red ball. We hear the diviner's words. Do you want to do that, Kim?
It is a weapon.
I know how much you like him.
Love him.
The red ball seems to activate and starts to expand.
So how come we've not seen this room before? Has no one on the crew stumbled into this room? Or is this just a normal room until somebody tries to download the logs and then it turns red?
Well, okay, I have a theory. I think I can explain this.
Okay.
Maybe it's actually programmed into the ship that the internal sensors don't know it's there, don't know this room exists, and Janeway has had her program tampered with so that there's a blind spot. She can't see there.
So there's no doors.
Yeah, maybe there's no doors. The only way to get there is through Jeffrey's tubes.
Because that ship isn't supposed to be very big, so you'd think they would see the door if there was a door. But yeah, maybe there's no door. Okay.
Yeah, it's just very difficult to get to, and the sensors have all been programmed that there's nothing there. Don't look in there. It's all fine. We're fine. Everybody's fine. How are you?
It's a Star Wars reference. It's a door behind a bookcase. You have to pull a book forward and then it opens. Okay. Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
Well, on the relay station, suddenly Frex's displays corrupt and we hear the classic Star Trek red alert sound. Also, Rok-Tok's displays start to corrupt. She grabs Murph, saying, I know, something's wrong. In the mess, the replicator starts shooting burned hot dogs at Dal and Jankum. Jankum's reaction, of course, is, all you can eat. He does seem actually quite happy about this.
Yeah, he's a pretty happy guy overall.
Yeah.
And we go to the med bay and the systems there are also going crazy. And now Gwen appears to be trapped in some kind of medical chamber that they put her in. And Zero manages to get themselves locked out of the room and the computer keeps saying access denied. So they make an announcement calling everyone to sickbay. Not only is this chamber filling with water, but somehow she's also now restrained. She has restraints around her arms and her legs. I would think that wasn't part of the original process.
Well, I think actually this is a Bacta chamber.
Like another Star Wars reference. Okay. I just didn't understand where that came from. Do you think that when the computers went crazy that these restraints came out of nowhere? Or did Zero really put those restraints on Gwen?
I assume that was all part of the computer freaking out.
Okay. Yeah, it must have been. We also see outside the station and the station's phasers have activated and it starts shooting itself. It's not shooting at the Protostar or at some other ship. It's just shooting at itself.
Yeah, it starts cutting into the structure of the station.
Right. Which is what the diviner described as something that would happen when this weapon was deployed. So I guess it's working. The water inside the tank that Gwen is in starts rising, and she takes like a last big breath before being completely submerged. And then, of course, to add insult to injury, she has another flashback of the diviner saying, it's a weapon. Rok-Tok eventually is able to force the doors open to the medical bay, and Dal is trying to cut into the med pod to get it open, but Gwen manages to activate that programmable matter weapon that she has, and she cuts it open herself and gets out, and everybody's happy.
Hologram Janeway calls Dal from the Protostar and asks what's going on as the station has gone crazy.
Yeah.
We see it firing phasers all over the place, and she orders them back to the ship now. As they're escaping, Frex stops them with a phaser and says, what did you do? Everything was fine until you arrived. Gwen calls to be beamed out, but the transport emitter is damaged.
Of course it is. The transporter always works when you need it to, and not when you need it not to in the story.
Agreed.
Oh, and also the gangway retracts, so they're trapped.
Yeah. We now have a lot of sequences of the station shooting itself, the Protostar being forced to move away, lots of explosions. Great animation.
Things are blowing up, things are falling from the ceiling. It's a mess.
Hologram Janeway tells them, find an escape pod and get out of there.
Well, that's good advice.
Yeah. Frex, who also hears this, shouts, tactical retreat, and takes the only escape pod. He says, sorry, no room for saboteurs.
First of all, that's not very Starfleet. You should save people even if they are saboteurs. I think you are still supposed to save them.
Well,
I believe we've covered that lesson on Discovery a few times.
I feel the poor guy might have gone a bit crazy.
Well, and secondly, why is there only one escape pod?
There's only one guy on the station.
Well, is there supposed to be only one?
It does make you wonder. It does seem like an oversight in, safety protocols, especially as, this is several hundred years after the Titanic. They think they would have learned about lifeboats by then.
Well, yeah, one might fail. One might accidentally deploy without the person in it. I mean, you should at least have a backup.
A roof beam could easily fall on one of the entrances.
Right, exactly.
Well, Dal manages to come up with an idea. They'll jump from the station to the Protostar, and they start putting on spacesuits. Jankum is very unhappy with this idea.
Yeah, he's like, I'm sorry, what? When we do get on the outside of the station, Dal now looks at the orbiting Protostar and says, oh, it's a lot further away than I thought. Duh. You're in space, dude.
Yeah.
So he asks Rock Talk what to do, and she's like, why are you asking me? But he says, you're the science officer, so science it.
I like that.
So she starts trying to estimate of when they would need to jump, and she starts a countdown, but then she second guesses herself and starts doubting whether or not she has taken all of the variables into account.
Yeah.
But 0 keeps the countdown going, and when we get to 0, they all jump. But of course, we have to jump because the station is basically exploding behind them.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of choice in that.
They do not. And they're all screaming as they head out into the void, except for Murph, who is really enjoying this ride.
Yeah, he's like a dog in a car. He's got his tongue hanging out.
Oh, that's right. That's exactly what that was with the tongue.
He was enjoying himself. They fly towards the Protostar, but too fast, and they miss and start heading out into deep space. But Janeway catches them all in a tractor beam. She's the smart one. And Rocktuck laments, maybe orbital mechanics isn't my thing. I know, she did pretty good. As they're being tracted in, Janeway asks what could cause a Federation station to tear itself apart.
Yeah.
And then Gwen has another flashback. This time she sees her father saying,
the Starfleet will welcome its return with open arms, and it will tear itself apart from within.
You love that, don't you? She then snaps out of it and turns to the others saying, I remember everything.
Oh. Now we go to Tars Lamora, and we see a Federation ship, NCC 80816, orbiting. I believe that's the Dauntless.
Yes, it is.
And Janeway and crew beam down, and she asks, what was the Protostar doing here? And they detect a faint life sign, which of course Janeway's hoping it's Chakotay.
Love these spacesuits, by the way. I think they look awesome.
Oh yeah, the spacesuits are very cool. And we see lots of the enforcer droids in pieces just floating around.
Yeah, they make a comment about how there was a battle here.
Yeah.
Yes, there was.
And Janeway finds a crushed Starfleet badge, and of course she's immediately thinking that it's Chakotay.
Yeah.
Although he would have left with a square badge, so it wouldn't have been this badge. They see a body floating in the low gravity, and a crew person reports he's in some kind of stasis. And Janeway says, whoever he is, he's alive, and hopefully he'll have answers. And then, of course, we look at who that body is, and it's the Diviner. This is not good news.
They do a great close-up, and it's him.
Oh, the dramatic end.
Yes. Oh, man, did they ever leave us hanging there?
Yeah, when we were watching it, I was like, what? That's the end? The half-hour episodes are too short.
Oh, they're pretty awesome.
All right, so that's the end of the episode. Let's start by talking about if anything stood out. Anything for you?
The animation, of course, it's just beautiful to watch. It's such good use of color. I just can gush about it.
It really is such a watchable show.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with you that the animation is great. I think what really stood out for me was I was surprised that we already were bringing the things back from the first part of the season. I expected it to take quite a while before we saw the Diviner again, for example, if we ever saw him again. Yeah. I certainly thought it would take a while before Gwen got her memories back. I didn't think it would happen in the very next episode. I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, they dropped straight back to where we were and just ran with it. I will admit, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I am interested in what this mysterious warning about Dal is, and I'm sticking with warning.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a warning. It could mean a lot of things, of course, but the flashing red is definitely concerning.
Maybe Dal is of the race that is actually really the people behind the Founders.
Oh. Oh.
Wild speculation.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but obviously we're going to find out. I wonder if it's going to be in the very next episode or if they're going to drag this mystery out a little bit. I hope this is the mystery of the season that we're going to work on.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet. I think they would do that.
In the Paramount Plus app, they had a description of the episode, which we looked at after we watched the episode, and it said that they were going to station Deep Space 13, which they never said in the episode, so I wonder where that came from.
Right. And really, they've only had 4 more deep space stations since DS9.
I think there are more than that.
The other thing I have to bring up is, so in between the end of Deep Space Nine and this show, which is, several years, it doesn't seem that even with the upgraded computers and more technology, they've actually installed any anti-malware on their servers.
Yeah.
They access some computer randomly, and all of a sudden, all the malware is downloaded. Which was always a complaint that we made multiple times on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, where they're just downloading software, or they're downloading logs or whatever, and then they're surprised when it takes over the station. I mean, I suppose if you are not used to having to deal with computer security, is that this is a Federation starship, so clearly it's fine. The trouble is, it turned up with people not from Starfleet.
Yeah.
And you don't know where that thing's been. And this station is out in the middle of nowhere on its own. You really have to add security for something like that. You don't just go, oh, yeah, I'm sure it's fine. I'll download this and everything will be okay.
Here's a USB stick. What could go wrong?
Just plug it in. What could go wrong? You know what they should try to do, James? They should try to put this, whatever this bad code is, or these logs, in a doghouse.
Oh, yeah. Invented by Mars O'Brien.
One of the worst episodes.
That was a head scratcher for the both of us.
Because technical people, the solution that they tried was, once they had downloaded this evil program, was if they would just upload it back to the thing that they downloaded it from, it would fix all the problems.
Hey, maybe if we eject the floppy disk from the drive, it'll go away. Classic episode.
Classic. What else stood out for you?
Well, I assume the whole point is this red glowing ball is some kind of Trojan that will affect the ships. And because it comes from the future, that we found out that the diviner's from the future, that maybe it has more enhanced technology than they're able to cope with.
Really, though, it's not super ingenious, because the best malware is going to replicate itself and go on to the next thing. And here, the station destroyed itself, and it didn't even have a chance to send it to someone else.
Like have an activation date.
Yeah, because really it should have sent it to another Starfleet ship or another station, and on and on and on, and then activate in 10 days or 20 days or whatever.
Wait till it gets a confirmation from the place that it's sent to that it's ready to go,
Not that we're encouraging that behavior, but that's really, if you want to be effective, you should have thought this through. And I think we talked about it in the last episode, that the plan didn't really seem that solid. And I think here's an example of it.
Well, maybe it's also down to the arrogance of the diviner's race. Remember, they were confident in their superiority.
Yeah, that's very true. That's always a problem. I am definitely worried about what's going to happen here with the diviner. First of all, he should still be crazy. I mean, he had the full vision of Zero.
Right.
And if he's suddenly okay, then that kind of eliminates the threat of Zero. So I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll have periods of where he's lucid and then he's not.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what could happen. We'll see, obviously. But I'm certainly worried what he's going to tell Janeway about the crew.
Right. Well, in theory, he could tell her anything.
He could.
He's an arch-villain, so the only thing he will tell you is lies and hypocrisy.
Lies and hypocrisy. I wonder if there is some kind of recording device within his suit. Maybe they'll get some info from the suit instead of from him.
That would be really good.
Yeah. There was that moment when Janeway and crew first walked onto Tars Lamora, when you get the scene of the whole crew in their spacesuits. And you mentioned that you thought the suits were really cool. I was very focused on this sort of tingly moment that they gave me to see Janeway in action, to see her in the spacesuit, and there she is on a mission. I just had all the feelings. That was really cool.
I would love to see more Janeway in live action Star Trek.
In live action Star Trek, yes, love to see her in Picard, certainly. But I also feel like what an opportunity to create an entire Star Trek animated series about Janeway.
Would love that.
Yeah. Although, do you think that we'll lose listeners if I say that I hope she never finds Chakotay? Because I don't want him on that series. I'm so sorry, people who love Chakotay, but I hope we don't find him.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Janeway was what I tuned in for.
Ditto. Well, let's move to character development. Was there any important developments here?
I like that they were removing that cynical edge that Dal seemed to have from the start.
Right.
That he was actually starting to open up. The things that had made him the way he was, the lack of trust, the very self-centered nature that he had to have, obviously, to survive, is being worn away. And I really hope they don't do something awful to him, like a new betrayal that'll bring that cynicism back.
Oh, yeah. I hope not, too.
It's kind of a storytelling thing that they often do that, but I just hope they don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there are sort of two important elements from this episode that show a difference in Dal from 10 episodes ago.
Yes.
The first one is he shows a real vulnerability and some self-doubt when he's talking to Holo Janeway, because he's worried that somebody is going to see him for who he is and maybe he won't be enough.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, that's something I think a lot of people, probably a lot of kids, but adults too, who can really relate to that. That's definitely humanizing him more, getting that sort of harsh edge that he had in the beginning, you know, off. And then the second really important thing is when they're standing out on the outside of the station and they're trying to figure out what to do, he is relying on others.
Oh, yeah.
He is now really part of that team. One of course, the best things about Star Trek is the teamwork. And even though Rock Talk maybe has a slight doubt to herself in that moment, but he immediately turns to her and says, "What should we do?" And the arrogance of that character in the first couple of episodes didn't do that.
Yes. He's becoming reliant on them. Well, and you're also seeing the team effort here as well of Zero's the one actually keeping the countdown going while Rock is doubting what numbers she came up with.
Yes, they're all learning to really rely on each other.
Yeah.
Even when that thing happens in the medical bay where Zero gets locked out, the very first thing that they do is press the communicator and say, "Everybody to sick bay."
Right.
So, yeah, the teamwork part of it is really fun to watch.
Yeah, oh, agreed. Yeah.
Any other character development?
No, I think that wraps it up.
Yeah, I think we covered the highlights anyway. So now, normally what we like to talk about here is how Star Trek Prodigy works as a kid's show, and we are going to go to our kid correspondent, Mahi, and see what she thought of today's episode.
So, did you watch this week's episode? What did you think of it?
Yes, I watched this week's episode and thought it was very good. I have waited quite a while to watch Prodigy again. I am so glad that Gwen is recovering. Her memories are coming back. Del Rey is a special species, and Starfleet can tell him what he is. The best part, they are all safe on the Protostar now.
Was there a lesson in this episode?
Lots of lessons. I learned that scientists have to be precise in their calculations and their science. The other lesson, you have to think smart and quick while trusting each other to solve a tricky problem like escaping from self-destructing space station with no escape pod.
What do you think the diviner will tell Admiral Janeway?
I don't think the diviner will tell the Admiral anything, as he was driven completely mad when Zero revealed his true form to him, while Gwen only caught a glimpse of Zero's form and had Zero's help and medical treatment to recover. The diviner had no help and must be out of his mind.
Now that the crew knows that the ship is a weapon, will they try to avoid Starfleet?
No, the crew will not avoid Starfleet. They can take hologram Captain Janeway's help to tell Starfleet the truth about the spaceship being a weapon and convince them to accept the Protostar crew. The crew would also want to go to Starfleet as they can help Del Rey know about his species and his home too.
Thank you for your analysis, Mahi.
I know that Mahi and at least her mother have been very excited to get this show back, so I'm sure she's quite happy to be back watching Star Trek again.
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all? So now let's go to our last section here and talk about the Star Trekkiness of this episode.
Okay.
What do you have?
Well, let's start with the voyage home with the whales.
And the pregnant whale, yes.
Yeah. Nimbus 3, Star Trek 5, The Final Frontier.
Yep, so we covered a couple of the movies for sure.
Absolutely.
We, of course, had a red alert sound. That's important.
Yep.
Maybe this is a good time to play that.
It's such a classic sound effect that if you're a Trek fan, you hear that, you're like, oh,
yeah,
ears perk up. Red alert.
I mean, obviously, we talked about the species that we now know Murph to be.
Yep.
And also Dr. Phlox.
Right.
That reference was there. The force field gangway was something that I only remember that from Discovery, and I guess it was in Strange New Worlds as well. So that's a reference as well. It's to something more current from Star Trek.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't know this. We had to go back and watch the scene with Chakotay where there's just a tiny hint of the Voyager theme when they throw the bottle at the Protostar.
Right.
Yeah, I loved that.
That was a nice touch.
And I think another important Star Trek-y thing is at the beginning of the episode, Dal is doing a narration. I mean, he's doing a log.
Yeah.
But the logs are essentially just narration. And he catches us up on what's happened since the last episode, the things that are going on.
Right.
And that is really reminiscent of a Sisko or a Picard log at the beginning of a new season, or at the beginning of an episode after some big event that occurred, where I'm just telling you that everything's getting back to normal. Here's where we are. That was a very Star Trek-y moment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel where we are now, this is very much a Star Trek show.
Yeah.
It's given up that sort of nods towards Star Wars. It's very much a different animal from what it was when it started.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, then before we go into our ratings, let's play the feedback from Jeff, X-Force 11.
Hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff, X-Force 11, leaving my feedback about Prodigy Asylum. It is so good to be back with the Protostar crew and to jump right back in where we left off at the previous part of the season. I am loving the crews working together, getting to see them in uniform and getting to see Janeway on the hunt for the Protostar and Chakotay. I cannot wait to see where we go on the back half of this season. All right, those are my thoughts. X-Force is out.
Thank you, Jeff.
As usual, Jeff being very positive. I'm glad he's enjoying the show as much as we are. Thank you, Jeff. Always appreciate your feedback.
And one piece of additional feedback from Cal E, who writes, "Can Starfleet please install some antivirus software?"
If only. It reminds me a little bit of when we're trying to get tickets to Comic-Con and we can't get logged on or something happens to the system. And it's like, if only you had some tech geeks who could help you. And it's the same with trying to add security to the station.
Yeah.
If only you had some engineers who could help you with that problem.
They should have got Cisco. Cisco could write really good software. We had proof in episodes Cisco could write really good code.
Oh. All right, that is it for our feedback today. Well, let's move then to rating. So what do you give Asylum out of 10?
10 out of 10. It's such a good episode. It's well paced. The story's a classic sort of Star Trek kind of story.
Yeah.
It leads into this bigger arc of the virus or Trojan that's on the Protostar.
Yeah.
We got to see Janeway. So much of this is just great Trek.
Right. Well, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say about it is that it feels maybe a little bit unfinished, like this was the beginning of the next thing.
Yeah.
There could have been maybe a bit more meat on the bone of the episode, but it's not that I didn't like it. So I think I'll probably give it a 7.
Yeah.
I don't like to give everything a 10 like you do, but 7, still a very good score. And would I watch this episode again? 100%.
Oh, absolutely.
I would totally watch
Yeah.
it again. Yeah, this is very entertaining.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps up episode 11. If you want to send us feedback for future episodes, you can email us at RebingeIt@gmail.com. That is how most people get a hold of us. You can also tweet at us on Twitter at RebingeIt. We are also RebingeIt on Instagram and YouTube. We're RebingeIt everywhere. You can also join the Talk Through Media Facebook group. That's facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. You can give feedback for the episodes there. We also put out a post looking for feedback, and sometimes we get feedback there. But obviously, the RebingeIt@gmail.com is the easiest, and that is what most people use.
Yes.
But lots of way to get in touch with us if you want to be a part of this podcast.
And don't forget, you can also listen to our Deep Space Nine podcast called ReBinge Deep Space Nine, available everywhere you get your podcasts. Also available on YouTube at ReBingeIt.
And we have just hit season 6, so we are coasting right along on that show.
Yes, we are currently on a break, but we will be back on November 13th, 2022.
And we're starting to learn, as we now have our second podcast, and we're talking about what comes after Deep Space Nine. We're starting to learn that we should just be ReBingeIt. Somewhere along the way, we'll change the feed or we'll add a new feed for ReBingeIt for all of our podcasts and just make our own lives simpler.
Right.
But for now, we have this podcast, which is Star Trek Prodigy, a ReBingeIt podcast, and we have our other podcast, which is ReBinge Deep Space Nine, and we hope you listen to both of them.
That's it for this week. Come back next week to hear the ReBingeIt crew take on a new episode of Star Trek Prodigy.
And I don't want to spoil anything, but the episode title has the word Borg in it.
Oh.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.